The moment I saw little Marcus tearing down the street like the pavement was on fire and his shoes were soaked in gasoline, screaming something about snakes, I knew something had gone absurdly wrong. Marcus wasn't the kind of kid to overreact. This was the same kid who once got stung by a bee and simply muttered, "Huh, that's new." But now he was flailing, shrieking like it was the end times, and pointing directly at my shed like it had grown horns overnight. I dropped my grocery bags right there in the driveway, eggs smashing in protest, and sprinted toward the chaos. The shed door was wide open, a massive red flag considering what was supposed to be securely locked inside. As I rounded the corner, I nearly tripped over 3 cracked plastic bins filled with dusty tinsel and shattered ceramic elves, none of which belonged to me. Standing in the middle of it all was none other than Veronica Whitman, HOA president, full-time busybody, and self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, wielding a clipboard like it was Excalibur and giving a tour to 2 other board members. Behind her, one of my albino corn snakes was lazily slithering along an incubator rack like it had paid for VIP seats to the apocalypse, while another disappeared beneath a box labeled 4th of July tablecloths. I'd seen horror films begin with less. You know the moment where someone screams, "You fools! You've unleashed chaos!" and no one listens? That was me. I didn't even need to say it out loud, because just then, a small garter snake poked its head out from behind a wreath, and one board member screamed high enough to crack the HOA's collective dignity in half. Veronica dismissed the chaos with a wave of her hand, muttering something about leftover Halloween decorations, right before another board member bolted like he was chasing an Olympic record, and Veronica herself shrieked as a snake coiled around her clipboard. I strode over, snatched the clipboard from her frozen fingers, and said through clenched teeth, "You just broke into a federally licensed reptile research facility." She blinked at me like I was speaking fluent Martian. "This building wasn't being used," she insisted smugly. "As HOA president, I have the authority to repurpose idle community assets." When I asked what community asset, she said it was within visual range of the common area, so it technically fell under HOA jurisdiction. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with white-hot fury. This wasn't just trespassing. This woman had unknowingly tampered with 3 climate-sensitive egg trays, 2 enclosures housing mildly venomous specimens, and 1 finely tuned environmental control system. A single disruption could collapse the whole project. The snakes weren't lethal, but a bite could mean ER visits and real consequences. Yet there she stood, shouting to onlookers that she'd discovered a secret snake lair. A crowd had begun to gather. One teen had his phone out. I calmly scooped up the garter snake and returned it to its enclosure, noting with dread that the incubator's temperature had dropped, a serious risk to the developing eggs. I took a breath and looked her dead in the eye. "You just committed felony trespass on a state-sanctioned wildlife conservation site." She rolled her eyes and uttered the 2 dumbest words she could have chosen. "Prove it." So I walked to my house, came back with a folder thick enough to club someone with, federal licenses, conservation contracts, and a survey proving the shed was entirely on my property. I held it up like a judge delivering a verdict. She glanced at it and scoffed. "Snakes are pests, not protected species. These snakes are endangered," I snapped. "They're part of a habitat rehabilitation program." She waved me off with a condescending, "I'll talk to legal," and left. Bins, clipboard, and a shed full of disoriented reptiles in her wake. I spent the rest of the day salvaging what I could. 2 snakes had crawled beneath the heat mats. 1 had laid eggs early due to stress. And sadly, 1 hatchling didn't survive. That night, I sat in the dark, staring into an empty mug, thinking about how something so absurd had turned so dangerous. This wasn't a hobby. It was a carefully coordinated research project, years in the making. And Veronica had barged in like a reality show villain with no clue what she was interfering with. I still hoped the rest of the board didn't know what she'd done. I sent a calm email with my permits, explaining the gravity of the situation. The next morning, I got an email titled HOA Emergency Violation Notice in bold red letters. Immediate removal of all hazardous reptiles from shared community structures, complete with a dramatic photo of Veronica pointing at a harmless snake. Her expression wasn't fear. It was satisfaction, like a cat that just cornered a mouse. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about snakes. It was about power. but she'd picked the wrong person to mess with. I wasn't just a guy with a few snakes in his shed. I was Dr. Cole Benson, lead ecological consultant for the state's Department of Wildlife. I had legal leverage, expert witnesses, and infrared footage of her breaking into my facility. And now, it was time to strike back. Veronica stood flanked by HOA board members Gary and Linda, declaring, "This structure violates HOA codes and must be repurposed." Gary crept into the shed like he was walking into a horror movie, while Linda stayed back, fanning herself as if the mere presence of reptiles might strike her down. Then Veronica spotted me. "There he is, the reptile hoarder endangering our children," she shouted. I raised my voice. "These are federally protected reptiles, part of a conservation project. Not hoarding, not illegal, and none of your business." But before I could say more, Gary tripped over a cord, knocking a hatchling container from a shelf. 3 baby corn snakes wriggled free. Chaos erupted. Someone dove into a hedge. Someone else launched a latte into the air. I moved fast, gently retrieving the hatchlings. "You just compromised a secure facility," I snapped. "Your actions have already killed 1 snake and endangered several more," Veronica huffed. "If they're that sensitive, maybe they shouldn't be next to a neighborhood," I replied coldly. "They're here because this is a research site studying human-wildlife coexistence. And congratulations, your behavior just became a case study." The teen who'd filmed the initial chaos had posted the footage online. It went viral overnight. By morning, a white pickup arrived. 2 animal control officers stepped out. Veronica greeted them like she was being rescued. "Thank goodness. There are venomous snakes in there." One officer responded, "We know. That's Dr. Vincent. He trained us." The other added, "We're here because someone reported interference with a federally licensed research site. That's a felony." Veronica tried to challenge their jurisdiction, but they pointed to the property map. Her authority stopped at the sidewalk. The mood shifted. Neighbors began asking if their kids could come visit the snakes sometime. Statements were taken. Veronica slinked away, muttering. That evening, I received a message from a reporter. The story had blown up. Not just about reptiles, but a neighborhood's fight to protect them. The HOA issued a vague statement about miscommunication, but the internet wasn't buying it. TikTok was flooded with memes of HOA Karen shrieking at harmless snakes. 2 days later, Veronica doubled down. Glossy flyers appeared on every doorstep screaming about community safety, featuring a photoshopped nightmare snake the size of a fire hose. Her accusations were absurd: venomous creatures, bitten children, trafficking investigations, all lies. Then she planted plastic snakes in my yard, trying to frame me again. Unfortunately for her, I had surveillance footage. At the emergency HOA meeting, I let her rant, then calmly played the video of her sneaking onto my lawn with her cousin in the dead of night. The room erupted in laughter. HOA President Greg suspended her pending review. I filed cease and desist orders backed by state permits and photos of the shed's damage. Then came the lawsuit. Veronica's lawyer, who hilariously used Comic Sans, claimed she was protecting the community. My legal team countered with expert testimony, documentation, and video evidence. The judge ruled in my favor. Veronica was guilty of trespassing, harassment, property damage, and tampering with protected species. She owed damages and legal fees and was legally banned from approaching my shed ever again. The Department of Wildlife upgraded the site, and with their help, we built a small visitor center. Local schools began taking field trips. Snake Awareness Day became a community celebration. Cookies shaped like snakes, kids learning, parents taking pictures. It was beautiful. Veronica eventually sold her house at a loss and moved away. Her reputation was in ruins. One quiet evening, I walked past her dark, empty porch and smiled. She tried to bury me in lies, but I planted something better, truth, and it grew.